Well, hey, I'm so grateful to be here with all of you today at Spire. I'm a California kid that was raised in Orange County and grew up in the shadows of Disney, the most expensive, happiest place on earth. 20 years ago, God had a distinct calling on my life and swallowed me up and spit me out in southern Indiana. To say the least, that was a culture shock. In Southern California, I was used to seeing obscure things kind of like this, a $1 million vehicle getting a 99-cent sweet tea at McDonald's. And now I see a regular event like this, Chuck getting his cigarettes at the old discount tobacco. Bethany Christian Church, where I serve, is located in a population, or was rather, of a town of 300. And relocated in 2013 to the booming metropolitan area of Washington, 11,000. And the church has a long history, started in 1830. Guys like Barton and the Stones and the Campbells who came in to preach in that pulpit of that church, and then they downgraded and hired me in 1999, and I've been pastoring there ever since. And when I started pastoring, that church it was very archaic, very relic in so many ways. In 1880, the building was built that I pastored in. It was remodeled in the 1940s. It was kind of this untouched relic of the past. It was a time warp. Everything around it had changed, but nothing inside of it had. The looks, the methods, the leadership model, the governance, the smells were all from a bygone era. The area where I live is a large Amish community that is around it. We're so rural that we can't even Uber, so we have to Yoder. That's a legit picture from my hometown. So I went to the Midwest kicking and screaming, and now I think if God asked me to leave, I'd probably go away kicking and screaming. He has changed my heart for people and for that place. And today, it's my hope that I can bring you some solid leadership teaching to those of you who are in small town, rural communities, and of course, anybody in any kind of leadership, that we can walk out of here a little sharper than we walked in with. So I want to talk to you today about Valley Forge and Turtle Speed, Dollar General, soil, and Jesus. Valley Forge. After the British had captured the city of Philadelphia during the Revolutionary War, they were really disappointed, the Continental Congress, with General George Washington, and they wanted to remove him as the general. After a series of setbacks, Washington retreated from Pennsylvania or from Philadelphia, 10 miles away, to a little obscure place called Valley Forge. And it was at Valley Forge that Washington had to refocus and reconsider what he was really fighting for. On the screen is this very famous painting that you're probably familiar with of Washington on his knees praying and seeking God's guidance in that moment. He had to recalibrate his values and his strategy, and during that winter, he rested his troops in himself. He readjusted his plans, and he was rejuvenated to go out and to whip up on the British. And from that moment on, every single skirmish that Washington and his men were going to fight had meaning to an end result to win the war so that we could become a free nation. For Valley Forge, Washington resolved that he was no longer going to fight against what he couldn't win. There are so many leadership principles here that we can find from Washington and Valley Forge. Number one is some hills just aren't worthy to die on. Too many pastors have killed their ministry on top of hills that have no meaning. I hear about it. There's guys who I know who have been fired because they just can't compromise with their leadership. They've been fired because they changed the order of service, even though no one wanted to change the order of service. Fired for removing the pews on a Sunday morning, making the congregation sit on the floor. That's probably a fireable offense. There are some battles that are worth the fight. But stubbornness with leadership or removing the pews just to change it up, that isn't one of them. Second, some battles use up too much of your leadership credit. Okay, your congregation may have lost confidence in you. You only have so much leadership credit, and that is gained by what's called trust. And trust is gained by what's called the rules of the 3 C's. Your competency, that's your skills that you bring to the table. That's your knowledge. Then there's your character. That's your honesty, your integrity, your discipline. Then there's your consistency. Like, how stable are you to the organization? What are you going to bring in and day out? And guys, it doesn't matter the size of your congregation. If you're going to make some wide sweeping changes, it's going to cost you leadership credit, and you only have so much of it. So I'm challenging you to spend it wisely. Like, some battles just aren't worth spending it on. The battle you're fighting right now, it may not kill you, but it's going to cost you. You've worked hard to gain trust. Don't lose it fighting battles that aren't worth spending your leadership credit on. Number 3, if you don't know what you value, you'll never know what's worth fighting for. So be strategic, like have an end result. And the quickest way to determine what changes should be made within the church that you're leading is to determine what values you have. Like, do you know your values? Is probably the big question. If you don't, here's a simple way to find your values. What are you ready to die for? Like, literally ready to die for. And when you know your values, it really overrides your whims and your wants in ministry. Values, what it does is it keeps you from unnecessary fights. And I bet to say that there's many men and women in this room who are wounded and have wounded others fighting battles that won't matter 20 years from now. So don't let something that doesn't matter cause you to lose something that does. So if you don't know your values, pray for wisdom. All right, James teaches us to pray. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. Ask God for some guidance. And there's a season, guys, to take ground. There's a season to fight, but there's also a season to rest and to be at ease and to find some joy. There's a valley forge. Maybe it's Spire for you, a time to readjust your strategy, reconnect with your calling, and rejuvenate your faith. Ministry isn't war. Like, in hindsight, it should be looked back at as a very joyful, uplifting experience, leading and pastoring God's people. Okay, turtle speed. If you've never driven a lawn tractor before, you probably don't know this reference very well. But manufacturers had thought that rural people might have trouble understanding the throttle, so they decided that a rabbit goes fast and a turtle goes slow. You know, one of the great killers of any pastor in any context is pace. Let's just remember that leadership is a journey, not a destination. Most church leaders, especially rookie leaders, or could I say maybe even immature leaders, want to change too much too quickly. Friends, anything that's worth changing takes time. No matter how great your talent, no matter how much effort you put in it, wide sweeping, revolutionary paradigm change takes years, decades. It might even take the entire lifetime of your ministry. And can I also remind you, overnight success is rare. Like, most of us want to see things change immediately. I recently talked to a pastor that had this great plan to kill off a dying Sunday school model in his church and start up small groups midweek. So he shared with his elders in one meeting this great idea that he had, this wide sweeping change that he wanted to accomplish. And he set out the why and the what. Such a great presentation. I said, well, how did it go? He said the elders completely rejected it. And he went home discouraged. You know what he told his wife? We're done with this. I'm not even considering going back into ministry. Oh, his plan was good, but his pace was all wrong. He had it in rabbit gear, not turtle. See, what we forget about change is there's a psychological and there is a spiritual component to change. We aren't transforming programs. We're transforming people. We're not messing around with ministry methods. We're messing with people's lives. And we're changing hearts and souls and minds and strength. That's a spiritual thing. But we're also changing people's minds. And you know, psychology has taught us that it takes 6 months for the leader, that's you all, to say that the idea that you've been digesting is really a good idea. 6 months to come to a resolution that that's a pretty good idea. Think how long it'll take your elders. It takes them another 6 months. And man, if it's wide sweeping paradigm change, huge momentum change, it's going to take another 6 months for your congregation. What is that, 18 months of change? But what do we typically do? We take that 6 months resolution, we say this is a good idea, we package it up, and what do? We put it in a 2-hour meeting in an elders moment, and we say, this is what I want to do. And when they see that's been an A-bomb is dropped on them, they say, absolutely not, and we get discouraged. Hey, why don't we just learn the art of dripping rather than dumping? Change can't be microwaved. It's got to be put in the crock pot. About 99% of the churches that are represented in this room run at the speed of snail, not even turtle speed. Man, you can either embrace that or you can die trying to fight against it. Like, there are moments, I think, when urgency is needed, where you're going to have to sprint. But I think for most of the time, ministry is a marathon. And it takes time to get to someplace special. So slow down. You'll be a lot healthier. And so will your congregation if you do. Okay, Dollar General. Dollar General is a discount store, primarily caters to rural communities. If you've ever walked into one, you've noticed it's like no-frills shopping, a small footprint, bare-bones design, metal shelves, strip lights, cheap wayfinding signs. It's designed to get you in and out of that building in 10 minutes or less. And people in rural communities absolutely love it. Just ask Deborah Jackson, who was quoted in the local paper. She likes shopping at Dollar General because it's convenient and casual. And I don't, quote, have to get all dressed up like I'm going to Walmart or something. I hope that doesn't get back to Deborah. The mission and the vision of Dollar General is real simple. It's not to go after the wants, but go after the needs. And they're scratching an itch in these little communities. Dollar General has seen 29 years of consecutive growth, unheard of in the brick and mortar retail world. I talked to a VP of Dollar General in the elevator on the way down. He said that they have 16,000 stores, and next year they're planning on opening 90 more a month. They're killing it. But how? I mean, like, you're swimming with sharks like Target and Walmart. Dollar General has simply focused on communities who are underserved. Hey, small churches, how about start going after the underserved in these rural places? My friend Randy Kirk, who is the lead pastor at First Capital Christian Church in Corydon, Indiana. Corydon has a population of 3,000, small town. First Capital, like so many churches, was faced with doing something new and different or dying. And so Randy and his ministry team got together and they discussed, how in the world can we start serving the underserved in our community? And so they decided that they were going to provide a worship service for the inmates that were in their local jail. So they developed what they call Church Anywhere. It's a micro-site model. So they broadcast the service and they broadcast a few of the song sets, and then they have a lay campus minister that leads the rest of the service. And they now have 18 Church Anywhere sites, from prisons and nursing homes and jails and orphanages and private homes. Friends, thousands of people are worshiping and leaning into Jesus because of First Capital's development of Church Anywhere. One prison that they minister to has 500 of the 1,800 inmates attending services. This year, Randy has told me that they're celebrating more than 70 baptisms coming from their Church Anywhere sites alone. You know what First Capital is doing? They are scratching an itch. They are serving the underserved, and they never once thought we're too small to meet the needs of so many. Small church, listen, I know it's hard to take sometimes. You don't have to do everything, but you got to do something. And you can continue to tell yourself that the world has changed, that people aren't as Christian anymore, and they're not going to embrace a church of sound doctrine. I think there's truth to that, but I want to challenge you to reach deep into the heart of your community and find the need and start to scratch the itch. I'm not challenging you to be the biggest church in town or the best church in town. I'm challenging you to be the best church for your town. And there's a difference. Look at the needs of your community. Scratch the itch. Serve the underserved. You know, if Dollar General were to close its doors at the next end of the week, they would be sorely missed by so many in all these communities. And my question for every church leader in this room is, if your church closed tomorrow, would anyone in your community even notice? Okay, soil. Any farmer worth their salt would tell you that the crop is only as good as the soil. Unhealthy soil, no matter how healthy the seed, won't produce a good crop. And farmers know. I mean, any farmer knows the content of their soil, and they're making adjustments every season to get the soil mixture just right so that the health of it will grow a healthy crop and produce something great. The culture of your church is the soil. Bad culture, you're going to grow an unhealthy congregation. Good culture, you grow a healthy congregation. The pastor is the farmer of that culture. So my question to you all is, how's your soil? And you're saying, well, what's the determination? The determination is, what are the fruits that are coming out of the culture? Like most leaders undervalue culture and they overrate strategy. But no matter how great your strategy is, if it's planted in a terrible culture, your strategy is going to eventually stagnate. So let me kind of provide for you some good ways, simple ways to develop a healthy culture, just to start the upward climb towards that. Number one, model the change that you want to see. You become the example rather than the exception in the congregation. Culture starts with the leader. That's you. You're ultimately the big change maker. People will buy into you way before they'll ever buy into your vision. So live out the change that you want for your church. Number two, work with the leaders who already embody the values that you desire for the congregation to possess. You know, there's people in your congregation right now, either perceived leaders or they are positional leaders that have a heartbeat maybe for evangelism or for serving or for disciple making. There is someone in your congregation that is sampling the good culture, the good soil that you want to create. What I'm saying is start working with the willing. Number three, identify the unique principles and methods of your congregation. Look, a congregation doesn't do everything wrong. You might think it does, but there's some good in that congregation. Somewhere there's some good in that congregation. And you got to capitalize on the good. And when you find it, you got to celebrate it and cheerlead it and scream it from the pulpit on what's going right. They do something well. Maybe it's they cook a good meal. Capitalize on it. Use its uniqueness and gain some momentum in your community. Number four, isolate and eliminate the toxins that are found within the congregation. Make a list of things that just aren't working. Friends, there are some weeds in the soil that got to get pulled because they're taking the nutrients away from the culture that you want to create, and it's not allowing it to be healthy. There are programs that need to die, methods that need to be changed, people that need to be isolated, and they're keeping you from having this healthy congregational culture. Number five, patience and persistence pay off. You know, I've been at Bethany Christian Church for 20 years, started when I was 10. And a lot of the success that we have seen has just been from staying put. Have patience with people that you pastor. You heard the 20-60-20 rule. That's 20% of the people are going to accept it right away, whatever the change is, whatever vision you might have. And there's the 60% that they just need a little bit more teaching, but then they'll come on board. Then there's the 20% that just says, over my dead body. That ain't going to happen. Be patient and persistent with those folks. There'll be challenges, there'll be setbacks, there'll be problems. Don't let setbacks stop you from leading as God has called you to lead. And finally, Jesus. Some of you in this room, you don't feel like you can lead someone out of a paper bag. Preach Jesus. Even if you feel that you can't create the needed change in your church, preach Jesus. Remember at some point in your ministry, God called you to preach Jesus. Do you remember that moment? It was long before the first nasty elders meeting that you experienced. Long before you had the divisive problems with the staff member. Long before the old lady called you the devil. Long before the old man wanted to pick a fight with you and hit you with the cane in the parking lot. That's a true story. I knew I could have beat him though. I knew I could have taken him out. What I'm saying is before ministry ever got messy, you were called to preach Jesus and pastor his people. Do you remember that? Your number one strategy should be to preach Jesus. Like whatever the season your congregation might be in, whatever the challenges that you're facing, whatever the change you want to create, enter the pulpit with the good news of Jesus. No matter how bad the congregation might seem, no matter how tough the elders might be, you preach Jesus. Jesus is the one who is needed in our lives. Preach Jesus Christ. Lift up Christ so high as you possibly can that all men will be drawn to him. Preach Jesus the rescuer. Preach Jesus the restorer. Preach Jesus the redeemer. But above all, preach Jesus.